All right, I have 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the special session for the Granite Falls School Board to order. Please rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We have today Director Ledoux, Director Kincaid, Director Bain, as well as myself, Director Veach. Our chair is going to be joining us here in a little bit. I'm going to start things off with item 2A, Superintendent Report. Dr. M is attending virtually. So Dr. M, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. My report is very similar to last month. In fact, you'll recognize most of these slides. I am going to go through it a little bit more quickly, but I do want to go through it for a couple of reasons. One, I know that Director Carey wasn't in attendance at our last meeting, and there are things that are very relevant to our discussion tonight on the budget. And second, we did have a technical glitch last month, and so it did not get recorded. And so I do want to go through some of these things again. So I appreciate you indulging me with that. And again, I'll be much quicker than I was last month. But I did start off with that acknowledgement that we've really done some nice things over the last 4 years with iReady. We've dealt with the pandemic. We've had some great working relationships with our associations, and especially when it comes to our PLCs. And really, we've seen some nice efforts by all of our teachers and paras and staff. It was a difficult year, and I know that if you talk to any of our staff members, they will say that 22-23 was actually a little bit tougher than 21-22 when we first came back. And so, a year ago about this time, I had asked the board and staff to let's commit to 2 years where we just really focus on our PLCs. We encourage our students to do their best on the assessment, have meaningful transition conversations as students move from one grade to another, and really protect that academic learning time. And I shared last month that I really expect a breakthrough in our academic performance in 23-24 and 24-25. So it's really an exciting time. The other thing I shared last month was sort of the stair-step improvement. And I know Dr. Manns went ahead and sent some of those reports to you. We're seeing a steady increase. Now, yes, we still have a number of students in the red zone, which continues to be concerning, but we anticipate in next year that yellow group increasing, and even our green on grade level performance by students also increasing. So really some great work, which just shows that there is systemic work in our PLCs going on. Our school improvement plans, which will be come to you again next month for all the schools for the coming year. They will again include both typical and stretch goals. And I've said this a number of times, averages can hide a lot of the highlights and challenges, but our data, we're seeing that upward trend, and that's exciting. And again, just a big thank you to our teachers, our principals, and our paras, because the trend line is going up. We're going in the right direction, and I'm excited for some breakthrough years coming up. Now, then I transitioned to some of the more specifics and how it relates to our budget conversation tonight. And that is, we did have a management and operational review done in May, And that was what prompted that, of course, was just the spiraling staffing in special education. We all know our expenses exceed our 13% allocation. And compared to other districts in the region, we have a higher ratio of paras to pupils, higher percentage of students who are identified. And especially these last 2 years, there's been an escalation in the cost of staffing. So we reached out to WASA, which is Washington Association of School Administrators, and they do a lot of management reviews in various areas. It's not just, specific to special education. In fact, they went ahead and then in this report, which will become a final report this Friday, they started with the focus of this question of how do we serve our stakeholders with special service programs so that learning's achieved, but also fiscal resources are dedicated appropriately. And so this team came in with that overarching question, and they spent a day and a half on site, but there have been a number of Zoom calls with myself, with Beth, and with other stakeholders. During this time, they've interviewed a variety of stakeholders, and they've spent a lot of time looking at the documents that we sent them, a lot of financial, a lot of program documents, and they have provided a draft, which I've gone through and working with them, have made a few edits. And as I said before, or just a minute ago, their final report will be out on Friday, and which time I will share with everyone. And they're very open to meeting with the board of directors. They've, of course, it's summertime, they've been on vacation and wrapping up this report. But again, they're open to coming, whether it's a regular board meeting or a special work session. We just need to let them know. So within the report, just some of the initial impressions broken down into two areas. First, academic. The overarching theme was, or first impression was, it's not a special education issue, but it's, or not just a special education, but it's also a general education issue. And on the operational side, the big theme is current practices are not financially sustainable. So looking at some short-term and long-term changes, they recommend in the report that they must be tied to strategic plan, which makes sense. And so when we look at our strategic plan, our first goal, of course, has to do with instruction and learning, powerful teaching and learning. Their initial impression was they're surprised at the number of referrals. They really believe that, are we letting, especially our kindergarten students, are we allowing them to just work through, let's say, the first semester of learning how to do school? And especially at that age, not all have been exposed to some instruction and learning, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're special education students. It's just a matter of time before they get caught up. Excuse me, just a second. They state that a one-to-one para to student should be the exception and not the norm. And of course, in the report, they cite their concern that what we've been doing is not sustainable. They want to make sure that we have a strong MTSS plan, multi-tiered system of support, that provides interventions sort of on those three areas of academics, behavior, and attendance. And the reason I shared a little bit about the academics is we're going in the right direction. We're seeing there's that stair step, that upward trend. There's more work to do. And certainly with, I give a lot of credit to Mr. Davis, who oversaw attendance last year. And we'll continue that work next year and making that a real initiative. But certainly behavior, we've all heard behavior concerns. And so we do have a plan for that as well. Tier 1 supports are within classrooms. We just need to ensure that we're doing everything we can in the classroom before it goes to a referral. And they also ask that clear communication with staff and family on the referral process, and that professional development on inclusive practices as well as on behavior is occurring for general ed. And I think that's where they really emphasize it's not just a special ed issue, it's a general ed issue as well. The strategic goal 2 has to do with that positive school climate. And their recommendation is that we have a consistent plan at a minimum within grade bands, but really we need to have something throughout the school and district. And we're actually working on that right now so that we have some common language and expectations K through 12. We're already securing additional training for our administrators and our staff for the admin retreat, as well as for School of Rock, for inclusive practices, as well as professional development for student behavior. Strategic goal 3 is early childhood education. We started transitional kindergarten this year, which has been a success. We want to return to kindergarten roundup pre-COVID, which involved more observation of students and how they interact rather than stations, which was very welcoming and very good these last couple of years. But we want to go back to doing some student observation while they're there. A lot of work has gone into working with our preschools, and certainly our early childhood committee. They've partnered with a lot of agencies, especially with the library, in assisting our young parents from prenatal to 4-year-olds. The second area is what's not financially sustainable. So these have to do with goal 4 and goal 5, good management, growth management, and good stewards, where we continue to grow in our enrollment. It's been an upward trend for really the last 5 years. But our special education rate has also grown, but it's growing faster than our enrollment. And our one-to-one para support has also grown. And it's out of whack compared to other districts. It's not a best practice, and it's something that we'll be working with our principals and IEP teams this year, that we cannot use that as the default. And the recommendation from this plan is pretty explicit on what we do instead. It does not mean we don't provide support where needed and appropriate, but again, the default is not a one-to-one para support. One of the members of this panel is also a financial director, and has been a financial director in education for the last 20 years. And he just comes out bluntly and says, we continue this practice, we will become insolvent. And so obviously we've got to halt this immediately. Again, we'll provide support, but we need to avoid that default. And just as a reminder, because we've spent a lot of time this year talking about the prototypical school model, a school district our size, or Sultan or Lakewood, we're basically assigned 3 paras, and we have 77. Now, a number of those are grant funded. Some are just transportation, but Marshall will talk about this in a minute, but I believe our number is closer to 61 paras. And that, again, is incongruent with districts our size, and something we need to address immediately. The immediate actions, which I've asked Beth to review, we have to review the current staffing to ensure all student needs are met. So that's, again, we're not talking about taking away services. It's just providing services in a different way. We have to review our one-on-one IEPs this summer, and then look at how we provide those services in the future. Some students will always have a one-to-one, but there are others that really we might need to just say, we'll provide support, X number of hours through this way in a classroom rather than one-to-one. We've been right-sizing staff where possible. And this evening, when I'm done and Marshall is presenting the 23-24 budget, a lot of work has gone into getting that end of year fiscal year 24 fund balance to 7%. And as the panel report recommends, looking toward 24-25 with a 10% fund balance. So I broken this down into 2 phases. Right now, we're in phase 1 through the start of the school year. Some of these are going to be repeats that I just shared, but one of the recommendations from the panel was we need to support kindergarten. We need to look at that as, let's stop the practice of an automatic referral, recognize that sometimes students take a little bit more time, but it doesn't mean there's a disability there. But we can support kindergarten. And so we do want to assign a couple of paras just to kindergarten so that we can provide some intervention that's not necessarily special education, but on how to do school right now. Our multi-tiered system of support, we need to have a thorough understanding and implementation of training and interventions, they're robust before we do any sort of referral. We have inclusive classroom training and practices, and so we're looking at additional professional development at School of Rock and classroom management training as well. The referral process, K through 12, it needs to, which Beth had presented to our administrators and to the board at some point last spring. It needs to be posted so all stakeholders know what's entailed. Needs to be known and implemented with fidelity. Again, we're reviewing all the one-on-one paras. There has to be that fidelity to school improvement down to the individual level. And then on the operational side, right sizing of classes. And we've spent really since April right sizing classes so that we're closer to our collective bargaining agreement in ratio of students to teacher. And so there's a huge savings right there. Right sizing our support staff. And I know Marshall tonight is going to be talking about the close monitoring of financial status next year, because we cannot have another year like this year. And so there's some controls that are going to be put in place. These are all very difficult decisions in the short run. In the long run, we are going to be better off financially while still providing a quality education for all students. But we will be more in line with what other districts are doing. And then phase 2, which is fall and beyond, again, with those interventions by general ed classrooms, when done with fidelity, we should be reducing the number of referrals when we have robust, inclusive classroom practices and providing those interventions. We need to be talking even more about independence goals so that as students are successful in their IEP goals, they can even exit special education. And again, following the referral process with fidelity. On the operation side, again, keeping a very close eye on class sizes, reduce our special ed costs with our MTSS strategies, and again, as I said, frequent and continuous monitoring of our financial state. So what we're looking for, Marshall is going to share a bit about the 23-24 budget. We would like to bring this final budget to you next week with the 5:30 public hearing and then the regular board meeting. So I think I'd like, if this is okay with Director Carey and board members, I'd like Marshall to present, and then both of us would be available for questions.
Go ahead, Marshall.
The arrow keyboard.
Yes, okay, right. Good.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so I think you guys have had this maybe since Thursday or Friday. So I'm maybe going to assume a little bit that you've had a chance to look at it. There'll be plenty of time for us to have open discussion afterwards and questions and answers. But I'll also slow me down if I'm going too fast on some things you want to have more detail on. But starting with that little table of contents, there's 11 slides in here, not counting the table of contents. We're going to talk about the obstacles that we had in 22-23, the plan for 23-24, 1 year fund balance overview, a 4-year fund balance plan, a 1-year enrollment projection, a 4-year enrollment projection, 23-24 revenues and expenditures, a detailed breakdown of the change in apportionment, which is our revenue that's generated by enrollment, to compare 22-23 and 23-24. Something that was asked at the last meeting to have more detail about what each of the categories were. There's a 4-year revenue and expenditures forecast. There's a slide on what I see, and I'm not going to pretend to know that I can forecast all the risks, but the risks that I see going forward next year, and how we're going to try and monitor our progress and hold ourselves and other leadership people accountable to achieve our goals. So first off is the challenges we saw this year. We talked about it a lot this year, but we had a dramatic increase in student needs. Not sure if this is a 1-year trend or a multi-year trend. Feels like it might be a multi-year trend. We had a 16% increase in sped count this year, the number of students that qualify for services. Started the year at 18.5%. We ended the year at 21.7%. Resulted in a $1.5 million increase in sped costs. Large number of PK to second grade students that are on IEPs. I think we ended the year with 70 preschoolers on IEPs. Large increase in paraeducators, specifically one-on-ones. We had quite a few legal issues this year, some admin leave, a lot of legal fees. We have the driver shortages that the most visible is that it results in canceling routes, but the not visible piece, probably a benefit for our students, but a lot of the sports transportation and any field trips, those were done on charter buses. And we spent $150,000 this year just on charter buses for sports. Difficulty hiring nurses and specialty positions resulting in added costs and inconsistent services. And it's just, you know, we had a hard time getting in front of it this year. It's very hard to redirect things mid-year when you've issued contracts to staff that you really can't pull back on. So it's not the easiest thing to change course mid-year. So that makes it just very important that we start the year with a really good plan and are able to hold to the plan for the year. So the plan for the 23-24 school year is to obviously build an obtainable budget that meets 7% fund balance in 23-24 and 10% in 24-25. So we utilize attrition to reallocate certificated staff more efficiently. That saved us $1 million. We're funded at 17-1 at the K3 level for teacher salaries. We were operating at 15.5 to 16-1. So we used some creative scheduling of specialists and attrition to reduce the number of specialists by 2, still meeting all our contract obligations, still meeting all our minutes. And so we'll be closer to 17-1, probably more like 16.5 to 1, 16.75 to 1 next year. So that saves us some costs. Optimizing class sizes at the high school, middle school, and crossroads by utilizing existing staff to fill openings district-wide. So getting certificated staff into the buildings where they're needed and not hiring staff to fill vacancies, but rather identifying staff that are qualified to teach in those other buildings and moving them to where they are more needed. And responding to the bubble of lower enrollment at the middle school. So there's the smallest class we have in our district right now is the 5th grade class. It's going to become 6th graders. So the middle school is going to have a bubble running through them of really small 6th grade and then 7th grade and 8th grade. So we don't want to staff the middle school like it has 3 big classes. We want to staff appropriately for the number of students that are coming through. So through all that shifting, we were able to save. It was a little over $1 million. It was like $1,700,000 or something, but $1 million. We want to utilize attrition and our reduced educational programs resolution to reduce district-wide support. We reduced 1 cabinet level position through attrition. We reduced 1 behaviorist, which was a district-wide, kind of almost like a TOSA, but a teacher who supported behaviors district-wide through attrition. And we're going to reduce 1 supervisor via the resolution. We want to follow the WASA paraeducator recommendations to reduce the number of paraeducators. Some of that will be through attrition. And when we see the resolution, it does say up to rather than define an actual number, because we think there's going to be some attrition and we're still working on identifying the number of paraeducators that are actually required in the minutes in the IEPs. So in the budget, we were really conservative. We reduced 4 paraeducators, 1 behavior monitor, and one campus monitor. And so they're really very conservative. And then one of the keys is we need to closely monitor and control extra time district-wide. We spend a lot of money on extra time. Some of that is overload or substitute pay or grant funded to do special trainings and stuff like that. But a significant number, somewhere around $400,000 just in the salary side of it, is for extra time, overtime, and adding hours to people's schedules to help just be on hand to control staff, control students. So conservatively, we feel like reducing it by $200,000 district-wide is an extremely obtainable goal, and probably will shoot for much more than that, but $200,000 is, again, I think conservative. So with that, there's a $2 million to $2.3 million reduction just by kind of right-sizing staffing. So onto the budget, trying to build it conservatively. So started with a $500,000 fund balance. We have the revenue of $42.5 million, expenditures of $39.5 million. That grows our fund balance by $3 million. So gets us to an ending fund balance of 9%. And this has conservative enrollment built in. It has staffing based on our levels of conservative enrollment. And it has a few reductions in paraeducators, but we weren't really conservative in that. That puts us at a 9% ending fund balance for the 23-24 school year. Figured we needed to overshoot our 7% goal to give us some working room to manage the unknown that would come at us, but it's a conservative budget still, and it's an aggressive budget. We kind of peeled away the budget down to 0 and built it up with kind of identifying what we thought our needs were rather than here's what we've been doing, what can we really cut? We kind of went out the other way. What do we really need? So the 4-year plan has us 9% in 23-24, 11.6% in 24-25. Then we start we're kind of looking at a 2-year window where we're going to be operating pretty lean to try and get our fund balance up to that 10%. And then in 25-26 and 26-27, we can start looking at how can we add back some of the services that we are minimizing in these 2 years to get to the 10% fund balance. This is our enrollment forecast for this year. We kind of built our enrollment based on our March 1st snapshot. So because we had a small senior class rolling off and we'll have a conservative kindergarten class coming in, it grows our enrollment by 50 FTE from the March snapshot, and it grows it by almost 100 FTE from last year's budget, and it grows it by 68 FTE from our average FTE for the school year. I held special ed kind of flat. I mean, it grew a little bit because we're going to have had the pre-K special ed identified kids moving up to kindergarten, and then we built back up to where probably pre-K, what we think it will be at some point during the year. So 474, there's not a percentage out there, but if I remember correctly, I think it was 21.6%. Again, it's a small kindergarten, flat enrollment everywhere else, results as an increase of 50, mainly due, and we'll have an increase next year too, even if we do conservative enrollment, because we have another small graduating class. But that's the end of our small graduating classes. So our enrollment could be more flat unless we think there's going to be a lot more growth in Granite due to that when the sewer moratorium is lifted. But the budget going forward, the 4-year enrollment, you see it's flat after the 2 years for the most part. This is a 4-year plan. It's kind of an eye chart. Probably makes a little more sense in your packet, but 2292 this year, or in 23-24, 2333, then 2355, then 2361. So really 2 years of decent growth and then pretty flat for the last 2 years. The 4-year enrollment forecast, the 4-year fund balance forecast, and the 4-year expense and revenue forecast is a high level kind of 50,000 foot requirement by OSPI, just that we have to have out on our budget to kind of show that we're at least thinking about future growth and planning 4 years ahead. It's really not at the detail level that the budget is, the 160-page budget is. It's really just one page of what do you think your expenditures are going to be, what do you think your enrollment's going to be, that kind of thing for 3 additional years beyond the budget. So in the 23-24 budget, the total revenue expenditures, the revenue is projected using OSPI's revenue tool. That generates the state apportionment, which is probably 65% of what we're funded on. The general fund levy increases to $5 million. That increases about $280,000 from this year, because next school year is the first full school year of the full levy. We removed $500,000 in federal stimulus that will be coming back. We put in $1 million in safety net. We budgeted $1 million last year. This year, we're getting 1.3 million in safety net and appealing a little bit more, so it might end up a little higher than that. All grants and other revenue, we kept flat to the school year. We may have changed how they were categorized based on some changes in accounting rules, but they are the grants and the money we get from Snohomish County, all those things we just kept flat. Our expenditures are based on the staffing needs for the enrollment projection. So we generate enrollment projection that tells us how many teachers we need. That generates the bulk of our expenditures. All the salary increases are built into the budget. As a reminder, inflationary factor this year was 3.7%. And then we had on top of that bargained 2.5% increase for teachers. I think we had a bargain 4% with no inflationary thing for administrators. We had a bargained 4% for non-represented employees, and I think 4% for classified staff. So there is a change in the pension formulas this year that for certificated staff, the percentage that the district has to contribute to the pension was reduced from, I think, 15.8% to about 10%. Significant cost savings for the district, almost $900,000. But you never get anything for free. The state also reduced our revenue by that because it's a kind of a pass-through thing. They give us money to pay for the district side of the pension funding, and so when they're not, we don't have to pay that. They don't give us the money. So it's a reduction on both sides in revenue and expenditures. This is a comparison of our apportionment to show the increase in funding that we're getting just on the state funding. So regular apportionment is just what our basic education students fund us. There's a formula that based on called the vertical school model. So based on your enrollment by grade, that generates staffing units. The state gives you a funding amount for each staffing unit that your enrollment generates. That gets all added up and it gives us apportionment. So our regular apportionment is going up by a little over $1 million next year. Our special ed apportionment, which is the special ed portion of the regular apportionment, which is kind of confusing, but there's special ed kids are special ed kids and their basic ed kids. So they break out the special ed portion of basic ed apportionment. That's going up by $118,000. Special education, there was a change in the formulas this year. The cap goes from 13.5% to 15%. As a reminder, we're at 21.7%. So we're still 7 points above, 7 whole percentage points above the cap. But the result of the inflationary factor and that change in the cap and some minor changes in some ratios gives us an additional little over $1 million. Learning Assistance Program is a state program that gives us revenue to help add programs to help with breakout learning for kids, going up by $15,000. Transitional bilingual going up by incremental $30,000. Highly capable, $2,000. Meal reimbursement is flat, although I think we're going to be able to have free meals at Mountain Way this year, but not Monte Cristo. So Mountain Way, I think, will be free. Monte Cristo won't this year, but in 24, 25, it will be. Crossroads and Open Doors are free. Middle school and high school are pay. And I think that even in 24, 25, middle school and high school will still be pay unless they change the legislation. But because of free and reduced rates and those things, Mountain Way and Monte Cristo, Mountain Way will be free next year. Monte Cristo and Mountain Way both will be free the year after. And that's probably where unless they change more funding models, middle school and high school, I think will always be pay until they change more dramatically how that works. So this is 4-year expenditure forecast. This just drives what those fund balance predictions are. Kind of an eye chart, but it's just our best forecast of where we're going to be in 4 years. And then this slide, I think, is important to spend a little bit of time on. Potential obstacles. We saw special education identified students increase from 18.5% to 21.7%. A similar increase in 23-24 will reduce the year-end fund balance. There's just not a whole lot of other places for us to right size without really changing the experience here. Whether we are 18, 19, 20, 25% special ed is almost irrelevant. The state's not going to give us extra money. If we are going to provide that level of service, we will need to find a way to pay for it by deeply reducing other things that will impact students in other areas. Transportation, they're in contract negotiations right now. That'll probably last all summer. They're mostly going for pay increase, not really anything else. I should note that back on that apportionment, the transportation piece of the apportionment is an estimate. They won't really know how much our transportation allocation, it's a big number, it's $1.7 million. They won't really know how much that's going to go up probably until January, and they'll true it up in January. But that'll go up by at least the inflationary factor. So it's probably going to be more like 18.5 to 19. So that 17 million is a pretty conservative number. Ridership impacts it, the inflationary factor, all those things will impact that when it trues up in January. They're actively recruiting very heavily. It got better this year than it was the previous year. It needs to get better next year than it is this year. We have more dedicated resources to Granite Falls, but it's not just a Granite Falls problem. It's a system-wide problem. You know, the city buses have trouble getting people. All the other school districts have trouble getting people. It's just a hard job to work. It's kind of a split shift. It's kind of a weird schedule. But we need to resolve the staffing shortage. And I think they're heavily recruiting. I think it'll be much better again next year, because as nice as it is for students to be able to ride these charter buses with air conditioning and high back seats and TVs on each seat, it's really expensive. Extra time. We really need to be united in limiting extra time. We need to efficiently utilize existing staff and their contracted schedules, and adhere to the budget and the agreed upon work schedules that we've installed. Paraeducators, there's always a risk that there'll be more paraeducators added throughout the year. Kind of address that in the next slide. Legal matters, 22-23 felt unusual, but there is a lot of stress in the world. There's a lot of things weighing on people. I hope things are better next year. I hope 22-23 is an anomaly, but this can't be the new normal, or else that'll whittle away at things as well. Bottom line is we have a really good plan to move the district forward. It's just up to us to implement the plan and to be united in our resolve. I mean, there can't be one weak link in the chain. We all have to, the school board, cabinet, principals, we all have to agree that getting to a 10% fund balance is very important without sacrificing services, but doing things more efficiently, more effectively, having controls in place, not just doing things because having more bodies makes it easier, because sometimes having more bodies makes it actually harder. So one slide we added was process monitoring, because we want to be able to report back to, we want to be able to report internally and monitor our process, but we also want to be transparent to staff, the community, the board about how we're doing. So we want to be able to come back in board meetings and demonstrate the progress that we're making. So we need to monitor extra hours monthly. Classified extra hours need to get charged to the building budget unless it's pre-approved by the district, so that the principals take ownership in their staff more and don't just kind of rely on the district to bail them out. Review the monthly extra hours report and share in the board meeting if needed. If you guys want to see this is kind of an interactive process, what you guys want to see, but if you guys want to see a report on how much extra hours and the cost of the extra hours every month, we'll absolutely include that in the board report. I can include that in my business report.
Yeah, of course.
We need to hold the buildings accountable monthly, and in doing so, we need to have the principals report any extra hours that they've authorized to cabinet weekly. If they're not being asked to track it, it's human nature probably not to track it. So we're going to require weekly tracking at our cabinet meetings, that the principals will report on how many extra hours they've approved, and they'll need to understand at that time that's coming out of your building budget. And when your building budget is gone, you don't have anything. And that brings us to monitoring building budgets monthly. It's hard to payroll processes once a month, so it's hard to monitor it more regularly than monthly. But as soon as payroll is done posting what happens to the building budget, we need to make sure the principals are viewing their building budgets monthly and understanding the effect that the extra hours are having on their budget. We also need them to understand that, you know, all building related discretionary expenses, if not pre-approved by the district, have to go to building budget. We don't have a budget for that kind of stuff at all. We give the budgets to the buildings for a reason. So we can't bail them out and just say, oh, we'll find the money to pay for these things. They have to come out of the building budget. And then we need to hold the principals accountable for managing their building budget. We need to give them the tools. We need to review with them regularly, but then hold them accountable. We need to monitor IEP meetings and the IEP process. We need to ensure that there's proper training provided to staff prior to the start of school. We need to adhere to the new referral procedures. These procedures need to be published someplace where all staff can easily access. And high stakes IEP meetings, as in meetings that are going to be added out of district placements or adding staffing to an IEP, those need to be attended by the director. And we should know about them before the IEP meeting happens, because by the time the meeting happens, it's likely a little too late. Update revenue and expenditure forecast monthly, including year-end fund balance. So I'll include a monthly update on the expenditures and revenue forecast, and including a year-end fund balance projection. Fresh in every board report. It's gonna show a big number to start, and it's gonna probably show $5 million fund balance to start, and it's gonna kind of reduce to that $3 million as the year progresses, just because the system doesn't forecast extra hours, sub pay, all those things don't really forecast until they happen. So as those things grow, as POs grow, as repairs grow that we're not aware of, the fund balance will start out much bigger than it is at the end. And it'll be bigger than what our budget says, because our budget accounts for all those other extra hours, repairs, and those things that we're not aware of yet. And the forecast will only include things that we're aware of. We want to have a report that can be in every board packet, and it can just be a report for the community and the board to just review. That is a document that illustrates the status and progress of all referrals. So this would be some kind of document that I have a vision in my head, but we'll work on what it's going to look like. But it'll have these number of students have been referred for services. These these are in the intervention stage. These are in the awaiting testing stage. These are in the ready for IEP stage. And these are new IEPs that have been generated. So we want to have some kind of transparent document, like a one sheet that just gives a summary of where we are on all the referrals, so that we're not surprised, you're not surprised. And again, if we're not tracking it, it's not going to get tracked. If we're not reporting it out, it's not going to get tracked. And we want to include that probably just as a report, that if you want it to be more than just something for you guys to review, we can certainly do that. But I think starting out as just something to review monthly would be a great step. And then I'm not even gonna imagine that I thought of every way to hold us accountable and to track what's going on. So obviously suggestions from you guys, and as the year progresses, and we see things happening, I think we can add reports that report out on things that we didn't even plan on. And that's where I am.
I just want to say real quick, we've been joined by our chair, Director Veach. I'm passing the gavel over to her so she can run the meeting.
Oh,
All right.
well, thank you. All right.
If there's a slide you want me to go back to when you guys have questions, just please ask and I'll go back to it. Or
For sure. So discussion, questions.
Does someone else want to go? I'm gonna warn you, I got a lot.
That's all right.
Do you guys really want me to go
Go
first?
for it.
All right.
You'll probably
I've got
cover
a
some
few.
things that we have. So,
Well, I've got a few. Can I ask a few or am I?
Please, go
I
ahead.
jumped in kind of
Yeah.
late, but first I want to say thank you because I can tell that you spent time sitting and really thinking about areas outside of your own of how can we approach this differently. And I appreciate just the forethought and the effort. So wanted to recognize, I see that I spent the time looking through this and I appreciate the effort. But what else can we do, right? I can see that you asked yourself that and I appreciate the effort. I love the idea of the monitoring the extra hours monthly. My question is, if they're reporting weekly to you, can we encumber those hours on their budget, similar to how you do with other things in the budget?
It'd be a pretty complicated process. We would like to, kind of a long-term goal for us is to move to a time management system that isn't a timesheet. Frontline has a time management module, but it's a pretty steep learning curve for implementing and for training the staff on how to use. But, the vision that we would have is that they would use front, and this isn't going to happen this year, but long-term, we'd like them to use Frontline to enter their hours in weekly. And then the building principal would have to approve the hours weekly. It would know their rate of pay for what they're doing. It would know if it's going to a grant. It would know all these things that are hard to know until the actual payroll process happens. You could probably come up with a general dollar amount, but it's hard to know if it's a dollar amount we need to worry about. We get 100 time cards a month, 150 time cards a month. It's hard to know the real impact of, is it hitting building budget? Is it hitting a grant? Is it hitting some professional development money we have set aside? It's hard to know that until the payroll processes. It'd be very labor intensive to try and weekly figure out what the total cost of these extra hours are.
Okay, so would it take us is it realistic to say it would take us closer to 6 weeks then to know? Like if it takes a month to turn it into you and then it takes you
That is
weeks
that is
to get it
absolutely
to
true. us.
And sometimes we don't get yours until nearly a month. So we could be 2 months in the future before we know.
I think I can post that immediately, so it can be up to date with the current payroll run, but the payroll run is a month beyond because timesheets get turned in. So timesheets happen in September. They get turned in by October 10th. They end up on October's pay. So it would be a month behind.
Closer to November before we see it in a board report, right?
Exactly. It would be, so September's overtime would be in the first board
November.
report in November.
Yeah, we still got a problem there because we have a little bit more thinking just because of a monthly payroll but I think that, yeah.
I was just gonna say, so my question is, so let's play that out. We see, when it comes to the board, what action are we taking to prevent that from happening in the future? To fix the problem then because it's okay, now we're aware of it late, but what would we have done because it sounds like the issue is still the monitoring of it. And it's we're going to monitor so something has to change upstream.
Yeah.
We definitely have to change process upstream. And I think that's where it's coming out of the building budget, no way around it. And they're reporting out on it to us weekly so that we can say, hey, you got to stop this. And it is up to us as cabinet and superintendent to, really say, after the first time it happens, this has to stop. This is unsustainable. You're going to burn through your building budget. And then once you're burned through your building budget and you start overspending your building budget, that's going to be disciplinary. That's going to reflect your evaluation. That's going to be, it's going to reflect poorly on you as a principal.
So I guess what I was getting at is from your point is, I think if it does get to that point where it gets to us.
It's too late. I mean, it's November for September, right?
Well, but the problem then is like, it's, you know, the one time it's, okay, shame on me, right? We need to then, we'll be sitting here jumping down, you know, Dr. M and Marshall's throats on, this can't happen again. And then if it happens again, then it's like, I just don't know like what we would change ultimately, because it's the monitoring process.
Right.
So,
Well, I think that you're thinking, and maybe a possible thing to consider is straight taking that money out of the building budget and giving the principal the look of, if this all, you know, without going, this is coming from a grant, this is coming from a whatever, just go, well, hypothetically, this is your worst case scenario. It all comes out of your budget. This is what you've approved this week, next week, whatever, and here you go, you know, and get your worst case scenario. Maybe that'll help. I'm not sure, but I just thought about that. The other, I think I'm going to, actually, you know what, I'm going to defer to you because I missed the first part and I have some questions, but you might hit them, and this is the slide I want to talk about, but I bet you will too, so.
Yeah, so I guess just to finish that conversation, because Director Ledoux, I think you make a great point. I was just contemplating that. I mean, is there, Marshall, is there a technological solution to this? I mean, I know in my own personal HR system, like if I submit for overtime, it says, hey, FYI, before you hit send, you're asking for overtime. And then when I approve people who report to me as overtime, it says, FYI, this person is submitting for overtime. Like, is there not a technological way that throws up flags that goes, hey, this person is submitting overtime, so that maybe in the pay period we can go, hey, you submitted for 2 hours overtime, come in late on Wednesday, 2 hours, because, you know, or something there where we can like really get real-time information and pivot. Not we, I guess I'm saying you actually, and admin team.
So we kind of live in the 1970s. We have a timesheet that's triplicate. So they write on it and it goes through to 2 copies, and they keep a copy for themselves and turn it in at the end of the month. But they are required to get pre-approval for any extra time. So they need to go to their principal and say, I would like to work an extra hour today. Is that okay? And the principal has to approve that. So we need to hold supervisors accountable. That's what we need to do. And the process already exists. The accountability is what's lacking. And I mean, we could see it after the fact, but even that's where it needs to change. Is there needs to be that pre-approval, pre-authorization from the supervisor, and the supervisor needs to understand that there's no extra time in the budget. And if you do use extra time, it's coming out of your building budget. When your building budget's gone, it's gone. And if you overspend your building budget, I mean, other districts, that is some pretty deep discipline for administrators in other districts.
So who owns that, Marshall? Like who, and maybe the answer is ultimately everything is owned by Dr. M, but who owns that communication, that monitoring? Obviously, as Ledoux accurately said, it can't be the board, right? We're always going to be a lagger in that.
I think the monitoring, I think, is business and payroll.
Yeah.
I think the conversations happen at cabinet and when we're meeting together with the admin team. The real accountability of principals overspending their building budget or approving extra time, that's on probably Dr. M. The accountability of a staff member just deciding they're going to work an extra 5 hours today because they want to, well, that's got to be on the supervisor to squash that very quickly.
Right. Okay. Can you put Dr. M's camera up, by the way? I'm just staring at myself. There you are. Hey, Dr. M. That's a good segue. So I wanted to go back to your presentation, Dr. M, and I appreciate you going back through that, if for no other reason than because I didn't get a chance to hear it and go through it. I appreciate the strategic plan related to SPED. I still have a lot of concerns related to SPED and our budget, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But I really like the detailed plan that you have, I guess. But I'm also want to find how do we formalize that strategic plan? And what I mean by formalize is how do we put that in a formal document that's got timelines, that's got, ownership, that's got, here's how we know this is working. Here's what, if it's not working, here's what that looks like. Here's what we're going to do if we discover that it's not working, like real concrete steps, plans, contingencies on that SPED plan that you provided to make sure that that is constantly monitored, that we're all looking at it, that we know where we're at, where we're going, and that there's a holistic vision there.
Right. Well, first of all, as I shared previously, and I didn't go into detail with the entire board, but I know I did with board leadership, that one of the things I'm working on from afar has been a standard operating procedure, and we're putting in for the admin. So really an admin handbook, and we're including things such as the process for special ed referrals. And we meet with our admin team, the entire admin team, starting on August 1st. And we're going through each of these topics that we're talking about tonight in detail, so that there's no misunderstanding when it comes to extra time or the referral process, or even just basic communication. So that's the first step. But then I think if we take the similar approach that you and Marshall are talking about with overtime on special education, one of the recommendations that the panel made, and that I visit with Beth about, is there has to be regular conversations with our principals, that we've got to be present and accessible, and to the entire staff. And they even go so far as to, make sure that Beth is in front of the entire special ed staff, monthly or quarterly, and having regular meetings with principals, so that all of those things are being followed and things aren't occurring after the fact in November based on a September decision. So these are really all the in-depth conversations we're having with principals, again, starting on August 1st, that will be articulated in that manual.
Okay. So, and obviously I that's something new, so I'm not necessarily sure what that looks like, or if that, fully kind of meets at least my vision. Not that this needs to be my vision, but I mean, so that SOP is going to have this strategic plan as well, and it's going to have like timelines. I guess I'm looking for a way that, fast forward, let's call it December 12th, where I can look at something and go, okay, it's December 12th. What's been our progress, right? You said that here's your timeline. You're up to this place. You're verifying as you're moving down the road. Here's the things that we're going to do. Here's how we tell if it's working. Like really understand where we're at in that kind of, because what we're talking about is a holistic change or modification to the way that we kind of manage, direct, oversee this area. And I guess I need some assurances that I, A, understand what we're doing, and B, that I can verify that we've done what we said that we're going to do up to this point, because I've seen lots of school improvement plans that have really good detailed plans. But the number of school improvement plans that have actually met those timelines, deadlines, is not very many.
Well, we're talking a few different things here. School improvement plans.
I'm just as an example of a detailed plan, timelines,
Sure.
What they're going to do, those types of things. Yeah.
But I think some of the things you're talking about are some metrics that could easily be reported on. And I think even Marshall mentioned some of that, whether it's, a financial metric or a referral metric. One of the suggestions he had put in under his controls is, okay, we're going to have a spreadsheet of those referrals and what that means, and did they follow all the interventions beforehand? So, I mean, I think there'll be a way to report to the board in a succinct way on some of these key metrics that we're talking about.
Okay. So kind of, just to finalize the conversation, so kind of, more information, what you're saying is essentially more information to come. You'll work on this. I call it an SOP. I apologize. I shouldn't use acronyms, a standard operating protocol. Along with this, and as that develops, we can kind of talk about that collectively, and that's a living document. And if I say, hey, can we have more information here? We can work together to kind of figure that out. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Perfect. So then, if it's okay, I guess I just want to jump into the budget. This being really the only meeting that we have prior to the public hearing and the potential adoption of the budget. So it's really my only opportunity to voice concerns and stuff like that. And so as I was saying, I still have a large concern related to the SPED. And a reduction in paras and what that looks like in classrooms and stuff. And I guess let me kind of walk you through why I have these concerns. I guess first off, one of we've been extremely challenged at times previously with behavior in buildings and even related to in the WASA report, behavior is a real issue. And Dr. Remy did a good job of talking about the training, the personal development that we're going to do to kind of get people the tools. But I have a supreme concern that that's not going to be enough. And I'm not sure what enough looks like, but if personal development in some classes could have solved it, I would venture to say we would have taken care of this a long time ago. So my concern is that we just trying to think 12 steps ahead, right? So we move forward with the school year. We have a ton of behavioral issues where we're having to evacuate classes on a regular basis again, teachers being hit, bit, punched, kids, stuff thrown, right? Which obviously is not an environment conducive to powerful learning and education. And then we're in the thick of the woods. We're like, what do we do? And our only solution is, well, I guess we need to hire some more paras, some more 101s to try to, deal with these behavioral things. I don't have a comfortability that we have in place. And this is not, I'm not speaking in a way where I don't want the feedback. I certainly want to shut up and hear what you have to say, but I guess I don't feel comfortable that we have enough measures in place, enough training in place, or enough whatever guardrails in place to really make sure that when we have these big behaviors with this reduction of these paras, that we're really going to be able to address that. Also, and almost as big, one of the challenges of being in this role is that I without an educational background, I have to rely on the knowledge base, the ability, the information that's provided to me as a director to make wise decisions. And that is obviously, my role is to, be one of 5 people that manages the superintendent, to communicate through you. You provide information to me so that we can all make informed decisions. And I must say, personally, when I look at the WASA report, and I know that I don't want to go too deep in the WASA report because I know that we are going to have a separate meeting about that. And I compare that report to information that was provided to me as a director. There's a couple of instances where I feel I'm going to say intentionally misled. And that's really challenging for me to say because I have a large amount of respect and love for this district and the people in it. But let me just give you a prime example. So in March 20th, we were presented at a special session, a PowerPoint called SPED Enrollment Trend. And in that, on the first page of the presentation, there's 3 bullet points. It says enrollment drives both revenue and expenditures in SPED. SPED enrollment is growing at the same pace as overall enrollment. And SPED K through 12 and total percentage fairly consistent over the 5-year period. So the enrollment drives both revenue and expenditures, I would say, no, not necessarily. SPED is growing at the same pace as overall enrollment. I would say, I think that's a lost lead. That's half the story and not the most important of that story. And that the SPED percentage has been fairly consistent, I would say the same. And let me just refer to a couple of items in the WASA report that says how I got here. This is page 15 of the report. The change in ratios over time in the paraeducator staffing is astounding. The approximate ratio of 1 paraeducator to 17 special education students in 2018 through 19 has now increased to 1 paraeducator for every 8.4 special education students, 117% growth noted earlier. The other staff and teachers represented in blue respectfully demonstrate flat or stable levels. So we've significantly increased paraeducator staffing. At this reviewers, I'm not editorializing, they're using the word staffing. Then it further goes on to talk about how the amount of, hold on one second, I don't like to use my words. Further analysis of certificated and classified staffing levels in special education reveals that Grand Falls has the inverse classified and certified staffing levels compared to the state. This information is pertinent as reviewer continues to emphasize through the available data that Granite Falls is not in line with other Washington school districts. Granite Falls spends 18.1 of its budget on special education. The state average is 13.5. Additionally, when examining the Snohomish County districts, the county average is 13.8% of the budget. So I guess my point when you look at those three is that, well, our special ed population only increased 5 point or so percent. However, our employees increased approximately 117% there, which is really the heart of kind of what we were trying to understand, trying to get our arms wrapped around, try to really needle into, which is far outpacing our enrollment in SPED and was not fairly consistent over the last 5 years. So I will admit that there's a certain amount of now skepticism because I'm struggling to accept the information that I'm being provided at face value. And I've got some ideas on how we can address that. I'll talk a little bit in a second, and I'm just going to leave that there. But I guess it's extremely challenging for me to lead and to make wise decisions if I can't necessarily trust the information that I'm being provided, that I'm getting the uncomfortable truths at all times. And in that, it makes me highly skeptical, again, that we've really wrapped our arms around SPED and this area and really like leaned into it because quite honestly, what I read when I read this is a complete mismanagement of this area by the people that we have employed to direct this area of our district. That's the only conclusion I can come to. We have a people problem in this area. And so when I look at that, and I also add in the information that doesn't feel like it was necessarily correct, right? If the decision was up to me, I would ask for changes in administration in this area because it's unacceptable to me in so many ways. But be that as it may, or be that as it is, obviously we have to figure out a way to move forward and to grow and to be better from here. So some of the thoughts that I had on how we can put in some more controls and stuff, and I'll shut up here in a second. I had a couple of thoughts. One of the things that we need to do, I think, is to update our policy, our 60-22 policy, requiring a 10% fund balance as recommended by WASA at the end of the 24-25 year. You mentioned in your 4-year plan, Marshall, that it was essentially at the end of the 4-year plan when we're going to try to start bringing back some services and kind of start peeling
Yeah.
back some of the things.
We get to about 11.5% at 2 years, and then we're kind of flat forward. I mean, after 2 years, there's a lot of uncertainty. We have collective bargaining with all of our unions. Enrollment is kind of gray after about 2 years. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but which is why we think we need to get to that, like your suggestion about the fund balance, changing it to 10%. We think we need to get there in 2 years where we have good visibility for 2 years, decent visibility for 2 years.
So I guess the part of that really stabs me in my heart is that essentially what we're saying is that if you are, because college and the high school is one of the things that unfortunately we've had to claw back.
I don't think so. We've definitely made a decision not to have classes with 4 kids in them or 5 kids in them. And I just think that's just not, I don't know that any district views that as sustainable. I mean, we would like to offer calculus, physics, Spanish 4, and when we do a Spanish 3-4 combo. Those AP classes, those high-end college and high school classes, but if all we can get is 4 people that want to take them, that's on us for not inspiring kids at a younger age to get to the levels where they're qualified to be able to take. Calculus, for example, if you have 25 8th graders taking algebra only, that's the maximum number of 8th graders that are going to be qualified to take calculus by the time they're a senior. So, and you're going to have attrition along the way. So, that's how we get to a calculus class that has 4, because we're not inspiring kids to want to be better than they have to be. And same with physics. There's prerequisites for these higher end classes that they have to be taking some pretty high classes at the lower age, or else you only have 4, 5, 6 students that want to take those classes.
Yeah. And so I'll just real quick defer to you, Director Veach, because I know we've had this conversation a couple of times, and if specific to college and kids getting their AA, do you mind just giving is what Marshall's saying, your understanding of that? Because my understanding was based upon the reduction of those classes that students, Grand Falls high school students sitting in Grand Falls High School could no longer get the appropriate classes to be able to get an AA degree without having to leave, essentially.
My understanding is it's true. So help me. Here's the thing, this board, just before I was on it, celebrated the fact that students could graduate Granite Falls High School and Everett Community College with an associate's degree at the same time. My daughter did. She, in fact, finished college a week before she finished high school. They just wouldn't give her the degree until she actually, had proof that she had the diploma. It's impossible now, unless we send kids to the community college. It's impossible. Because what I'm trying to get to, because we overspent in special education, it is not just one person. It is every administrator in this district. It is every member of the cabinet, some more than others, who overspent, and it went like I asked in October. And then I asked in November. I said 2 weeks. No, we can't do it. It's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's safety net. Then we did get to it. We got to it by May. But what changed before the end of school? As far as I can tell, absolutely nothing. Nothing changed. We kept our foot on the gas and we kept spending money. I saw no communication go out to anybody that said, stop doing this thing. We said, No more shared paras because we need to get safety net. I'm embarrassed that we have to spend $1.2 million before we get $1 available to be recovered. That's a ridiculous policy, and we have an entire cabinet and all the admins, and nobody knew that that's what we were doing. That one policy and the ripple of that, what I need you to understand, the ripple of that is that general education at the high school is affected because Mountain Way has 15 extra paras, or how many? I'm making that number up. Understand the ripple. Understand what's not happening at the middle school, which is why we have how many kids on grade level in math at the middle school? Of course we can't have calculus. We only have 23% on grade level. They're not taking calculus. And that's not just the principal. That is I need this cabinet to own it, every one of you. Special education, teaching and learning, business and operations, HR. I need all of you to own it. Go to school. Look at the classes, look at what's going on, and work together to figure it out. I beg you, because what I see here is the most hope. What you've prepared tonight is the most hope I've had the entire school year, because what I see is you throwing out suggestions like, you know, I need some accountability principles for this spending. You know, HR, we need bus drivers. Like this $150,000 chartered coaches, that's not going to work up for us. That's going to put us in the poorhouse. So HR, be creative. What can we do to hire some bus drivers so we don't spend $150,000, right? I can't remember. I don't have it all up here and I joined late, but I need to see some ownership to realize that this is the problem. You guys are the directors. And when you weren't paying attention and you thought it was somebody else's job and somebody else thought it wasn't their job and nobody's job, nobody checked anybody. And we're sitting here, us who are trying to care, and we're saying, why? Why in October are we projected? We're like 6 weeks into the school year. Why are we projected $400,000 to $600,000 over budget? What did you buy for $400,000? Well, needs are high. 6 weeks and you spent $400,000. Like, what did you buy for it? You know, I mean, I got rocket money for my own personal stuff. I can kind of look. So I need everyone. I need the principals. I need the assistant principals. I need the teachers. I need every member of the cabinet to understand you own this problem. By not paying attention, it happened. $1.6 million gone, and our students are paying the price because they're losing opportunities. And as you astutely point out, nobody's taking calculus because they're not there academically. They can't take calculus, they can't take anything. And anyway, I hope that answered part of your question.
Yeah, so the reason I brought up, thank you, Director Reeves. The reason I brought up Felton High School was just, I guess more of a challenge. And so I'm working through the steps of the things that I would need for me to feel more comfortable about this. So we talked about the update to the policy with a commitment to bring back those services, or for us to figure out a way, like Director Veach said, that the kids sitting here in Grand Falls can get an AA degree earlier than essentially the tail end of that 4-year projection, right? Because essentially we're saying if you are a rising freshman, sorry, it's just not going to work for you, right? You would have to be, you'd have to be in like 4th grade to be able to potentially do that. So we could talk about that more in a second. I spoke to Dr. Rim about more of a formal plan for the SPED so that with the controls and stuff, maybe this SOP will do that. I'm certainly okay with waiting and kind of seeing what comes out of that, because the last thing I want to do is to micromanage this. But when I feel uncomfortable and I feel a lack of trust, my initial jerk is to micromanage, and I'm trying to pull myself back with specific things that you can do to make me feel better about this. You talked about it, Marshall, in your presentation, kind of regular presentations to the board on progress. as well as buy-in from everybody, as Director Veach is talking about, that we're going to do this. And then I think also one of the more important ones is that our biggest concern with behaviors in SPED appears to be in our primary schools. We need, in my opinion, we should have potentially the director have a mobile office where they're in those buildings every day, helping assist, helping with training, helping with potential issues. Like we've got, people on the ground rather than being firefighters. Sorry, Bill. Where some of the buildings on fire and they're coming to save your life, right? Like we are preemptively there before there is a problem and really leaning into making sure that the training, the supports are known, that they know that while we're having to do this unfortunate thing affect people's life and livelihoods potentially later on today with this resolution, that we know that only comes true learning is really going to come from some additional support. So I'll shut up there. I know I've talked a lot. I'd love to hear you or Dr. Emmons' feedback to that.
I guess I'll go first. I'm just not in the loop about college and high school. I didn't hear any conversations about it being intentional to not have the ability to get their AA while still in high school. I think it very well could be a side effect of, we are telling them, classes of 4 or 5, 6 students, it's unsustainable. You need to get up to where you're 18, 19, 20 students in a class. And even that is lower than any of our surrounding districts. So that very well could be a side effect. And I have to get back to you guys on that because I was just.
Yeah, and I'll add too, we've been working with the high school in terms of the numbers of students, but at the same time, I haven't heard college and the high school being reduced, but we will definitely look at that. The other part of it is we've made some changes to improve the learning at the lower grades, and our new principal at the middle school is very enthusiastic, as is the high school math department, for instance, talking about calculus at increasing the number of students who get into algebra and geometry at the middle school level, increasing the track for the higher achieving, but also bringing all students up to that higher level. So you're absolutely right. It's a concerted effort, but the changes that our board approved along the way in terms of staffing are making a difference.
We have a 7:30 hard stop, right?
Oh, wait, how do we really?
That's at least what it shows on here.
I don't know if we ever necessarily have a hard stop, but yeah, we definitely did say till 7:30. I just lost track of time.
I mean, I don't know. I had several questions. I guess I'll probably turn them into statements really quick, just so that, one of my questions was, what are the true uncontrollable factors? I'll turn that into I believe that there's a lot more that can be controlled than we believe is. So it sounds like you're already working towards that. Just having that motto in your mind. Accountability across all levels, that's been hit. My ask of the finance is including judgment within a forecast. So I understand that we could start off in the beginning of the year saying, but it would behoove all of us to go into June or to go into February, knowing that there's going to be a huge hit because we didn't get any funding or anything, and to see that see a 12-month forecast, right? With this is where we're anticipating to be, and these are the hits that we're expecting. Because the last thing that I want to see happen is us start off with 5 million and us being like, oh, well, it's supposed to be going down. And then by the end of the year, we're like, wait, why are we at 1.7 million?
Right.
So having that up front so that we can make that, so having that judgment in there. And those are the high level things I just wanted to get off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just, 1 second is, I got into this late, so I'm really new to the board. So I didn't experience the communication issues that the rest of the board members did. But I've been playing catch up, and the presentation that Dr. Middleton and you gave tonight actually give me a lot of hope that you guys are moving this in the right direction. And I look forward to getting the updates on a monthly basis from you guys so that we can see. The one thing that you brought up really early in your presentation is about our timekeeping and automation. And what, or have we looked into what it would cost to automate, and is there grants available for school districts to automate our payroll system so that we can get from the 1970s into the 2020s?
I think our bigger challenges is the manpower to implement. There's been a learning curve, but learning curve on the district side is relatively small compared to the varying degrees of comfort with technology that our staff has, and our staff being, a lot of our classified staff being used to doing things in the paper world and trying to transition them over to the digital world, even for some smaller things like DocuSign, like signing documents online and having things, requesting absences online and frontline, those kind of things have been very challenging. So, and working with the labor unions about on those things as well. You know, that's probably where the challenge lies more than the cost of implementation. It's overcoming the preconceptions and the fears of change and the ideas of Big Brother watching me by staff. I think that those are bigger challenges that we would have to overcome.
Well, I know it can be done because we did it in
we
fire
want to.
service.
We absolutely want to.
We took everything from paper documents about 15 years ago and automated everything. So all of our EHRs, medical records, everything is automated. And we faced the same challenges. We just had to force the issue.
Right.
And then once it was implemented, it rolls smoothly. So, you know, hopefully we can move forward with that, with the guidance of our administration to kind of push the issue.
I know business office and payroll and HR would love to have that happen. So we are constantly talking about it. How can we make this happen? I think that within the next year, it'll probably happen.
Well, that'll be good because I think then it'll make some of the problems that we're seeing.
Yeah.
One, bring them more into focus and make it easier for you guys to lead. So that's it.
I just had a couple things to say. I was pleased to hear about your plan on implementing more behavior management training for the teachers and whatnot. And if you would have asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, I was the biggest supporter of paras you could find out there. And I know that you guys know that very well. But now that I've had the training that I've had, I know that we can solve some of our problems with more behavior management training. But I am with Carl in the thought that that's not going to, I don't think that that's going to solve all of our problems, but I am encouraged by that. And I think it will help. But I think that we can't get rid of paras until that happens. And we can't get rid of paras until we have, in addition to that, training for the teachers on parent communication and family communication, because parents, families, guardians, they are the biggest tool that teachers have that they're not using to help them with certain students and behaviors and things in their classroom, whether that's a student with an IEP or even in general ed, to talk to those parents on how to manage and get their kids through the day. So I think that's a huge one. And also making sure that our discipline practices and procedures are fluid across the schools, and actually having those things, because students see behaviors happening or they're performing the behaviors and they don't know that they're wrong. And so I think that is something that can help. And, you know, they're just kind of off base things, but all of those things working together can help with reducing our funding in all different kinds of ways. And then a couple other things are kind of questions or statements, but forgive me because they're uneducated. So it's just things off the top of my head, but we're talking about how down in the future down the road, when they release that moratorium on the sewer systems and stuff like that, and then more houses are being built and all that sort of stuff. Are we talking to, have we ever talked to, have they ever done anything to the city about supporting us? Because with all these people coming in, it means buildings and classrooms and more teachers and things like that. They're so excited to bring all this stuff into our town, but are they supporting us? And can we get support from them monetarily or in other ways?
Can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah,
One of the things we've actually started implementing is starting the process of getting mitigation fees from the builders.
okay,
So I've been talking to some of our surrounding districts on how they do that.
yeah,
And we think we're at the point where we can start asking for mitigation fees. And part of that is coming up with what we think a reasonable rate is. You know, there's a calculator that'll say, you know, every house adds, you know, there's for every 10 houses, there's 3 new students. And there's a calculator that says for every 3 students, that requires this much extra space, and they give you a dollar amount. So for example, Lake Stevens collects 18, well, they are allowed to collect $18,000 in mitigation fees for every new house. They had to negotiate though with the builders and the city and the county to reduce that by 45% because it's builders wouldn't build if it were that big of a fee. So we're in the process of, we've got our master plan that we've been meeting on. Once that's complete, we can apply with the Snohomish County for mitigation fees for future building, and that'll hold in a fund so we've collected enough money to actually expand our schools.
okay. And then the last thing, just a thought that came to my mind when we were talking about bus drivers and stuff. So looking up a Class A, which is what they need to drive a bus, it's about $200 to get that license, but then there's training on that. Is there a possibility, since the coaches are going to these games already, couldn't we get them the training they need to drive a bus, and then we're already paying them to go anyway? Wouldn't that save us a significant amount of money?
It certainly would save us money, but collective bargaining agreements won't
Yeah,
let us do that. Also, one of the problems that school districts are having is, you know, in order to, they're having to be very creative on how they attract bus drivers. And the funding model for school district bus drivers is less than the funding model for like RTA or, you know, city bus drivers. And so what, you know, we're offering sign-on bonuses, we're offering free licensing, all those things. They get their license with us, and then 3 weeks later, they go and work for the city.
yeah,
And so some of the things that other districts are starting to do is they're spreading out those sign-on bonuses over an extended period of time, so that if they're gonna earn them, that they're gonna have to be here for a year to earn the entire bonus. There's some ideas being implemented to try and be a little more creative on how we recruit bus drivers, but I mean, I know it was a hot topic at the legislative session this year. WASA, WASDA, WASBO, they're all pushing for a better transportation funding model for schools because it's just not competitive with other bus driver organizations. But until that happens, we're probably always going to be in this poaching mode from other entities.
that's all I got.
I'm sure Dr. M's got something. I know he's been diligently waiting. I know a lot's been said since last time you talked, Dr. I'm sorry about that.
Right, right. And there are a few things that I'm not going to have, you know, a direct answer to these things. I want to recognize that, as the WASA report states, there are so many complex issues that they seep into a lot of departments. We're also looking at a culture that, yes, we've accelerated spending in special ed the last 2 years, but there's been a culture of, you know, really high special ed for a number of years. That does not take away what's happened over the last 2 years, and as Director Veach has challenged us. Just within the last 6 weeks, I've met regularly. Our cabinet has met, and it's very clear to all of us that we all have to own this. We all have to come together. And the WASA report even says, until you have a strong leadership team at the district level who are on the same page, willing to again, deal with this at all levels and all departments. Until that happens, there is silos. And so we've had some hard conversations. And Director Carey, I think you made it very clear. We've 5 of us know jobs are on the line here. And I think the efforts that have been put in these last 6 weeks with what we've presented tonight show that the seriousness that this cabinet has taken. And now with your feedback, we will certainly go back and refine even more. But I guarantee we will not have another year like last year, and really support the recommendation of this resolution to help us get back on better financial ground. And with the training that I know Beth and Karen have been looking at and planning for, we've even taken the recommendation of WASA of who we should bring in to help with behavior training, and have made contact with her and starting to make those plans. We will come back with responses in greater detail to the questions you posed tonight. And I know this group is up to it. And again, one of the key words from that report is just immediate urgency. And that's how we are operating right now.
I know we're running late, so I guess I just real quick couple follow-ups, and I'm certainly not asking for a motion or by the board, but is an update to the financial fund policy to 7% by the end of next school year and 10% as recommended by WASA. Are you comfortable with that, Dr. M, and me presenting that in an agenda at an upcoming board agenda?
Yes, in fact, we talked about that this morning, and we'd like to add that to the 26th board agenda.
Okay. And then as far as that program that you're working on, when do you think you'll have that prepared for the board? And the only reason I'm asking is obviously we're approving this budget on the 26th. So I guess I just wanted comfortable how things are dropping in. When are you going to have that to us as far as, here's, layman's terms of the practices and timelines and how we're going to work that strategic plan, all that stuff. When do you think?
I can have some of that next Wednesday at our board meeting and at follow up in our August meeting.
Okay. Okay. That's all I got.
Believe it or not, I actually had some. I just went off at Carl's, but I really did write some notes. So maybe my notes are more of a discussion with the board as much as anything else. I like what you said, Dr. Middleton, about principals being present and getting out of their offices. I appreciate you saying that. I think that's huge. You and I have talked about, and I haven't mentioned it to the board members, so I guess I'll mention it now, about the last month in his presentation, he talked about the behavior. Obviously, we've talked about behavior every meeting for 2 years, right? I think it's very important that we set, and this was what Dr. Middleton's suggestion to me when we met one-on-one, was to set some district behavior guidelines, kindness, respect, like when you come to school, this is what's expected, be ready to learn. And he had something about 5 Ps or something like that from a previous district that worked well, but I can't remember what they are, but I remember he said them. So whatever that thing is, I'd like to see us define it now so that every principal in every building, every teacher, plaster those things on the walls and in the rooms and in the classrooms. You can act however you act at home, but set the boundary that in our schools, this is how we come ready to learn. This is what ready to learn looks like. And maybe, and I know that Director Kincaid mentioned this about her behavioral expectations and the things that, she kind of learned as part of her just her degree that she just, congratulations again.
Thank you.
She just got, so I think that's important. I'd like to kind of put a pin in that, make it something. I hope that you would support that we could set sort of district behavior.
And Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I took something and shared with our principals today that would be a unifying, basic principles that is as appropriate for kindergarten as it is for seniors. And I'm polling them as to whether what I've shared is something that they can embrace. We will find something, but so far the feedback has been very positive, and I'll bring that to you next Wednesday.
Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate the idea of the special education staff meeting monthly. I think that makes sense, especially when we had such out of control kind of unknowns this past year, whatever we need to do to get everyone on the same page. For the metrics that you suggested in your presentation, the financial metrics, yes, I think so. And yes, we're seeing nods. So yes, we would like those in there. And the referral metrics, yes, I think that's a great idea. And there was another metric. Was it, did you say somebody said the behavior metrics as well? Was that you as well?
I don't think that was me. I don't think.
Somebody mentioned it. And I think, you know what?
That's something we can,
Because, you were saying about the stages, that's right, a
Yeah.
dashboarding type
Yeah.
deal. So yes, because information and communication, and we can kind of see progress, like how many are coming in, how many are moving through. If we need to make a change, it gives us information to pivot.
yeah,
We don't end up in February before we realize, hey, maybe we should have moved in November or something. So I liked that suggestion. I appreciate what Director Carey said about, we have a people problem. It is what I'm saying, and I feel passionately about it because I care. I don't come to these meetings in hot conference rooms in the middle of summer or in freezing cold nights in winter, driving home on ice in the dark. Because not only because I like these guys, I do like these guys, but anyway, it's because we care. And I feel passionately about that. And I want you to care as much as I care, or more, or something, or just somehow understand that we do this because we care, right? For us, this is extra. This is us showing up to be extra, and we need you. We rely on the information. And so there's more than just the single example that Director Carey gave, where it appears that some of the slides that were given to us in the past are not congruent with the report we received from WASA, and that's concerning because we could have made different decisions sooner had we had more accurate information. Either that or the WASA auditors were incorrect in their audit and there's a problem there. Either way, we have some sort of information flow issue, communication issue, and we need to know. And we don't need a month to figure it out because I need everybody to know it now, like it's your job, because it is. I love that you were talking about ownership by all for all schools and the expectations in every school. One thing I've noticed was policy 2161, which is the special education policy, has an associated procedure. And if you're working on the operating procedures, should we put 2161 and its procedure on the next agenda in order to get what he's proposing, get a first reading of that at our next meeting?
We could, we don't approve procedures. I know you're not, that's
No,
you're
but
asking the group, but
if we
the
need to
policy
put the-
portion of that, yes.
But if we need to put anything from the procedure into the policy, that would surely highlight it if we're looking at them both together. It's a long policy, but
Yeah.
if we needed to adjust the policy to match what Dr. Middleton's proposing for the procedure, that would give us the foundation to make that information. Your thoughts?
I'm open to it.
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good.
2161. And yeah, those are my notes that I had. So thank you for what is though obviously I'm passionate, but I want to recognize again, I see the effort you put in here. I see the collaboration among people and it gives me hope. I didn't see it as much in the past, and this gives me hope. I see numbers that work and I see collaboration amongst departments that says that we're starting this next school year much better than we ended the last, and that gives me hope.
Well, and I'll add, this is the easy part. Doing it and holding people accountable and making sure we're on track all year, that's gonna be a lift.
Yeah, maybe we need to put your risks and your suggestions out on somewhere where we can see them too. Hold us accountable. All right, am I back in charge of this thing? Any other discussion?
So you don't need a motion or anything, right, Marshall? Or Dr. M, we don't need oh gosh, I just looked up and you're in the dark.
I know.
For the resolution. Hey, listen, we don't turn lights on down here. That adds a little bit more heat.
I know it's all like.
I think just a thumbs up that, what, bring this to us. at
Yes,
the next board
please.
meeting and, okay.
And if we can put 2161, I don't know the number for the finance policy that you were mentioning, Carl, but whatever that policy was, that one. Sorry, what is
60/22.
60/22 it is, that one.
You control the agenda. Your
Well,
board's here.
I'm just trying to, did we say there was a third one? Okay. All right, we got it. Thank you. So there's our discussion. So new business 2C, the resolution number 2223-14, reduced educational support programs. Discussion.
Are you presenting anything on that, Dr. M? Or
No, I'm not. We got that in the packet. We believe this is the way forward financially, and we do believe that we can still provide quality education with the remaining staff. And as Marshall pointed out, when it came to the paras, in the resolution, it says up to. We're still working because even today we had a resignation. So it could be up to 10 now instead of 11. So there are things that are happening in this summer, and that number I think will be lower, and we'll still be able to achieve what we need to achieve.
So just so I know the spirit of this, the spirit of it is that up to portion, because number 2 on school district as follows opens up a lot of doors. Directed to take such action that may be required by law to give appropriate notices classified employees to implement blah, 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 blah. So it just opens up a lot. So I'm just making sure that the spirit of this is for the up to.
Yeah, I mean, it references the appendix A, and the appendix A calls out the exact,
Okay,
what we're asking to have approved.
okay.
March, can you just talk really briefly about what's the procedure? Like what happens if this is approved? Is it like everyone gets notified and then there's kind of like a.
If this gets approved, we will go back and work with the classified union about how this will impact. We need to identify the positions that we would want to reduce, and then where those fall on the seniority list. And then there would be some seniority-based decisions where if one of the, let's say randomly, if one of the positions we wanted to reduce was the most senior para in our district, well, they could actually choose to have a different position in the district, and until that would all flow through until what would likely happen is the least senior paras would probably be the ones that would be bumped.
When will we know by?
Pardon me?
Like when will all the decisions be made of all the flow down and the chess moves?
So I think we probably would have to beginning of August at the latest.
And we have met with the association. They know sort of our overarching plan, and they understand where we're at financially also.
Does this need to be adjusted to reflect 7%?
No. Well, I mean, the 7% is not really adopted yet, but
Yeah.
we can, I mean. The goal of this isn't to get us to 5%.
Yeah.
The goal is because we haven't had any success getting to 5%.
Yeah. Yep.
Other discussion? So I'm going to tell you the thing that I've mentioned to some of the board members individually. The first year, pretty much the first month I was on the board, I signed a RIF resolution then. And because they said, oh, we do this every year. And then I saw the impact of the doing that every year. And I told myself that I'm not signing it again unless I absolutely know that there is no other way. Because these are real people with real families. And I'm going to say it again, our administration hired people, overstaffed, and now those people and their families are losing jobs. But you still have a job. But up to 11 families will be impacted, and I hate that for the measly $50 stipend that I get, that my heart has to carry the weight of 11 families being impacted. Do better. It's easy to just add staff because work is hard. But we're the ones that have to sign the paper at the end of the day. At the end of this meeting, there's going to be a little binder that goes around. And I have to sign my name as the board president. And there's a real life impact to that. Real life, not in your life. It might be a little harder to, hear people have to deal with having 11 less staff, or how many, actually it's up to 11 paras, but there are even additional positions in fact listed in here. So it's not easy. For me, I feel it. But I've looked at these numbers, I've pored over the world's most boring budgeting reports. I really have, looking for anything, and I don't see it. I've leaned on Dr. Middleton and Marshall. I've looked at everything we have, and I don't see another decision, but it weighs on my heart. Any other discussion?
Just that I agree with you.
Thank you. I feel it heavy. And I've already lost sleep over it, and I'm pretty certain I'm going to lose some sleep tonight over it. I can see you pondering, Director Carey. Your thoughts?
There's nothing more to say other than this is just extremely unfortunate. I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 22-2314, reduced education support programs.
I'll second.
The motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Would like to adjourn the meeting at 7:50.